Hey guys, so today I'm going to be giving this presentation on the Black-focused housing controversy at California State, Los Angeles. So the video linked in the post covers the topic in a little bit more depth, but basically the issue here is whether or not it's racist for Cal State Los Angeles to offer a section of on-campus housing focused on Black students. Specifically, there are 20 units out of a total of 192 that are reserved for Black students who are interested in issues pertaining to the African American community. This arrangement was created by the Black Student Union. They're the ones who came up with the idea and brought it to the attention of the school that minority students needed a safe space from racism. So some have gone so far as to call this self-segregation, and to a sort of implied extent, reverse racism against white students. So Cal State Los Angeles defended its decision, saying that the housing is open to everyone and that the units for Black students and those interested in issues that are of concern to the Black community, that these units provide a safe space for minority students who have said directly in their citing of the need for this sort of housing that they chronically face racist attacks and microaggressions on campus. And a number of other institutions have similar housing arrangements, and those include UC Berkeley, UC Davis, Stanford, and UConn University. To get to the point, I don't think it's racist to white or Black people. And I think that calling this sort of arrangement segregation is a sort of precarious limb to go out on. Attempting to draw any sort of parallels here to old-fashioned segregation seems pretty offensive to me. When you consider all the ways that racism and microaggressions can affect a person, especially when they're experiencing this over and over again, it's hard to really label it a crime to try and find a way to lessen that stress and prevent those effects. When you contrast this desire to preserve your health, when you contrast this to white-imposed segregation that wouldn't even allow white and Black people to use the same drinking fountain, it's pretty clear that these two aren't even in the same ballpark. Calling this segregation is just divisive and inaccurate. The driving force behind the creation of this housing is exclusively to provide refuge for minority students who are victims of racism. It's for the same reason that the LGBT community has programs and private safe spaces to shield victims from homophobic offenses. That isn't intended to exclude heterosexuals, it's a refuge. In the same way that housing for primarily Black students isn't intended to exclude whites, and it doesn't in any way keep the two groups from interacting with each other either in or outside the dorms. The book defines racism as beliefs, attitudes, institutional arrangements, and acts that denigrate individuals or groups because of phenotypic characteristics or group affiliation. So the creation of a safe space for victims of prejudice doesn't denigrate anyone on the basis of ethnicity. It promotes the well-being of students of color. And, it isn't just about shielding yourself from literal racist attacks. I interviewed a friend of mine who's a woman of color and was in a minority-only sorority group in college, and she said that it was the only place where she didn't feel like a token in a really white student population. Um, it was a place where she really felt at home and accepted because of the similar cultural backgrounds of her housemates. And in addition to this being a safe space, the Black Student Union at Cal State LA stated that the housing would also allow Black students to congregate, connect, and learn from each other. Um, I think saying that a safe space like this isn't needed is really to say that either A, the attacks and aggressions that these students are saying that they themselves directly experience is either false or not serious enough to warrant this sort of response, or B, you acknowledge the existence of these attacks and their effects on the students' well-being, but you don't think that they're serious enough to risk excluding or offending white students. This is serious. There are so many effects that can come as a result of chronic exposure to racism. Um, in the lecture on microaggressions, we learned about how a hostile campus environment can really impact a student's ability to learn. And in addition to this, it can cause numerous physical and psychological problems. Effects of prejudice, stereotyping, and racism can include a loss of access to services, anger, anxiety, depression, and a number of other physiological issues like hypertension and damage to the immune system. So, in summation, I think in cases like this, it's important not to prioritize white feelings over the health and safety of people of color. Um, I really think that at the core of this issue is whether or not people believe that reverse racism exists. And this might be somewhat controversial, but I don't believe that there's much, if any, evidence that reverse racism exists in the United States, at least on an institutional level. Whites are undeniably the majority, and this country has been built on an extremely unbalanced amount of power between groups, whether political, social, or economic. All of this power is held by the white dominant group. We all discriminate, and people of color may have just as many prejudices as whites, but at least institutionally, our society is built to favor the majority. Offering special housing, scholarships, etc., it's merely a means of leveling the playing field and attempting to even out the disparities that exist between the groups. So, I think this issue is sort of similar. It's sort of related to questions like, why isn't there a White History Month? Why isn't there a straight pride parade? And, the simple answer is that every other month of the year is White History Month. Even though there are 172 units in no way affiliated with Black students in particular, people are making a fuss over the 20 units that are providing a safe space for victims of racism. Issues like this, which have recently been considered racist against whites, are really far from equivalent to the systematic oppression of people of color. Um, in the same way that celebrating Black history doesn't devalue the history of European Americans, taking special care to provide for the specific needs of Black students does no harm to white students.